But I think for most people, the reason that they fail in making those positive changes is because they're trying to take too big of a step to start out with. So making these incremental steps, I think, is critical to the longevity, because it becomes something that's sustainable, and it's something that we can see the progress. We can gain the momentum, as opposed to when we're looking at this huge gap, this disparity between where we are and where we want to be.
Yes, yeah. And I will piggyback off of that and say, we also need to be making changes that we enjoy. I think that's huge with this movement that, by the way, it's not going anywhere. This understanding of how the microbiome works and the fact that it really needs plant-based foods to thrive and flourish, that's not going anywhere. I believe that in my gut, Jose. I believe it in my gut.
Welcome to the Personal Mastery and Growth Podcast, where we explore the keys to unlocking your full potential and living your best life. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. Whether you're looking to make a breakthrough, overcome a challenge, or simply live with greater clarity, joy, and purpose, you'll find the tools and inspirations you need right here. So let's start your journey towards personal mastery and growth right now. Welcome back to the Personal Mastery and Growth Podcast, your go-to resource for practical tips, insightful research, and inspiring stories to help you unlock your full potential. I'm your host, Jose Johnson, and I am an expert in mindfulness, mindset, and peak performance. And I'm so thrilled to have you with me today. And today we are going to discuss the brain-gut relationship and how what you eat impacts more than just your waist size. And to help you better digest this concept, I brought in a special guest who is an expert on how diet and nutrition can be used to transform all areas of your life. So let's belly up to the bar and welcome to the Personal Mastery and Growth Podcast, Em Biever.
I'm so excited. This is thrilling. Thank you for having me.
Oh, this is exciting for me too, you know. So just as a little bit of a backstory for you folks, I work out of a co-working facility in Lancaster, Pennsylvania called the Candy Factory, and Em recently joined the happy family here at the Candy Factory. And when the post came up to introduce her, it said something about nutrition and stuff, so we kind of connected, and then she said the magic words to me that they got me all hot and bothered, which was microbiome.
It's pretty sexy, the microbiome.
Yeah, it's very sexy.
So it makes sense that got you going.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to talk a lot about this kind of stuff, and hopefully, folks, you're going to enjoy this. But this is going to be really, I think, so super helpful for people who are looking at ways to step up not only their health, but just their quality of life. Because I think this is a forgotten, or not even forgotten, I think a lot of people just really haven't talked about these concepts. So we're just going to dive right into the deep end. All right? We all know that we need to eat to live, but how does our nutrition influence how we live?
Ooh, that is so good. It's so juicy. So first of all, The area that I'm really excited about, and I have to say is kind of this budding, beautiful, going back to that word juicy topic within my field, is looking at gut health. And the fact that what we eat, the degree to which that impacts our energy levels, our mentation, our mental health, it's exploding what we're discovering, and the research and good quality research that's starting to be done on this. So the microbiome, which we can talk about, and we can define that for people. But that really is a hot topic. We can go there. But also, if you think about having something in the morning to eat, breakfast, or whatever your typical thing is to start your day, there's a lot of people that by 10 a.m. will be searching for their next cup of coffee, or will start to get a little cranky, or they walk by the candy dish in the office and it's so hard to resist. And the reason for that is because our blood sugar was wonky from how we started our day, what we had to eat or didn't have to eat. So that kind of shift in energy, people I think often don't realize that has to do with what they're putting in their mouths. And so something I'm super excited about is just really making that straightforward and practical for people, how making little shifts in how they eat can affect their energy levels, their mood, irritability. I feel bad for kids. We see kids that are bouncing all over the place and then irritable. A lot of that has to do with food. What did we give them or what didn't we give them? They might not just be wild little knuckleheads running around. It might be because we're feeding them things that are really throwing them off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's the old saying, you are what you eat.
Mm-hmm.
And also there's a saying in the technology field, garbage in, garbage out.
Yes.
And I think that really is important because we don't think about not just the type of foods we eat, but also like the quality of the foods. And the big thing over the past few years has been like GMO and organics and things like that, and how that quality of the food has changed over our lifetime. I mean, I'm old and I can.
You are old.
I'm very old.
Wow.
But I'm well preserved.
You're pickled, so you're good to go.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I always said that the best diet was alcohol and Twinkies, because it would keep you very, very sterile and preserved.
So true.
But no, the fact that we don't often think about that level of how our diet impacts our lives. It's always like, just don't eat fatty foods, or watch this or watch that. But there's no real understanding of the impact that it has beyond just our weight.
Yeah. I mean, it's super well said. And I think that's also because we're getting a lot of mixed messages. So, for example, the really go-to example for mixed messages and why we think actually we're doing a good job, I'm going to use breakfast cereals as a really good example. Okay, so I'm a mom to a 4.5-year-old, and now I'm very lucky because I ended up going into the field of nutrition. So I have the inside scoop, and I'm able to decipher when I see a box of Lucky Charms, which, just so you know, and I'm not up on a high horse, they were my favorite cereal growing up, okay? And the ratio of the marshmallow to the little crunchy bits, like all of it was gangbusters. I loved it. So I'm not coming from a place of, I didn't grow up eating this way, okay? Or rather more healthfully. I grew up eating kind of a typical standard American diet. But now, having the education and the background that I was fortunate enough to get, when I see those boxes of cereal in the grocery store and I see Lucky Charms or I see Fruity Pebbles and it says fortified with all of the essential vitamins and minerals, or now proteins are a really big deal, right? So, has 12 grams of protein per serving. I'm able to say, time out, hold on. I know that marketing companies, that the big food industry knows what's hot right now, and they're going to put it on their box, okay? And so when I'm thinking, well, I'm going to do what's best for my kid, and this has what they need to be healthy and to grow up strong, and this is a good way to start their day, I can see why we're not connecting those dots, right? Because a lot of people think they are doing the right thing when they are purchasing these foods. And then their kid goes to school, their blood sugar plummets by 9, 10 a.m., and they're ornery. They can't concentrate on what they're doing. Or we have the Fruity Pebbles. I know there's grown-ups that eat that. I mean, it's because it's good. That's the other thing. I mean, we eat these foods not because somebody's pressuring us to do it. They're engineered to be hyper-palatable foods, which I don't know if we want to go down that road, my friend. But I will get up on my soapbox about that. So, I think part of it is, some of it may be lack of the education of not realizing that just because something says it's fortified or it's high in protein or it has a certain amount of fiber, it's low in fat, that doesn't equate to you are going to feel well and you are going to be healthful or healthy if you eat this food.
Yeah. I love, one of my favorite low-fat foods to eat is Peeps.
Peeps.
I
Zero
love it.
fat, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Zero fat
I
all
love it.
day.
All
Eat those
day.
Peeps all day.
Yeah, and you'll never gain any weight ever. So definitely the way that food is marketed now, the ultra processed food and things like that, and like you said, it is crack for our taste buds. So, and it's not necessarily things that taste the best or the best for us. So that's where it gets really sticky, I think.
Well, I think it gets sticky because then we don't have enough supports for people. And we don't have enough, we're not making it easy. So again, kind of circling back to where the money goes, it's the people that have a lot of money are the people in the big food industry. So your Kellogg's, they are going to have a lot of money. The fruit and veg industry, right? There is no money. So we don't subsidize the farmers that are producing fruits and vegetables. They're not getting money from the government to help produce crops that end up being really affordable for everybody. So the things that are subsidized are corn and wheat and soy and things that are then produced into these really affordable sugary cereals or crackers or, Peeps. Those are affordable for us because the farmers that grow those crops are getting a lot of money to do it. So it's this really kind of vicious cycle. And so that's going to be the easier choice for people if it's less expensive. And if you don't really have to think about a recipe. You don't have to think about a recipe when you pour that cereal into a bowl. But you get these peppers and tomatoes or carrots or sweet potatoes and you go, oh, what do I do with this? So I think we need to be part of the solution as nutrition professionals, as people in the medical field that have contact with our patients. We have a responsibility to make this really accessible. And from a policy perspective, we have to make these foods accessible for people to purchase. So this is not, I hardly ever point the finger at the person that's eating. Okay, so I'm pointing the finger at a lot of people that set up an environment that make it really hard for people to make choices that will be healthy for them.
Yeah, and that's where I get a major bug up my butt is when it comes to the cost of eating healthy. When I was much younger, it was very easy to, and I mean, it still is easy to just run to a local fast food place and pick up, pick up $1 meal, pick up a $5 value meal, things like that. Then if you want to go out and get a good, healthy salad, organic, the chicken is free range or things like that. So you're trying to avoid as many as the antibiotics as possible. You're paying, sometimes 5 times more for the same stuff. So particularly for people who are underprivileged, it's so difficult for them to have a healthy diet because it's too damn expensive unless you're growing your own goods to actually have that readily access to the foods.
Yeah, and that concept right there gets me really excited. Teaching people how to grow their own vegetables. You need a container, you need a bucket, soil, and seeds, and sunshine, But I love that idea. But I think, again, that means, here within the city of Lancaster, let's make that a thing for people. Let's provide those, let's get funding so that everybody, if they so choose, can start growing at least some of their own produce. Boom. Also, I will say there are a lot of hacks to eating healthy on a budget or making some changes towards creating more sustained energy for your kids in the morning, or we can loop back to that idea of microbiome, feeding your microbiome to reduce risk for disease. So one of my favorite, I'm a huge bean fan. Okay. And I think that they are it's like this little hidden secret of nutrition. You can get those canned black beans, chickpeas, all of those northern beans, and the list goes on. And in this country, we don't have as much access to other countries to a variety of beans. We are pretty sadly limited in terms of our variety of beans, but there are a lot that do exist, and they can be super convenient and super cheap. So for, $1, you can get a can of beans. You rinse them off. Excellent source of fiber, excellent source of protein, and adding that into, instead of thinking that we have to have big salads with all this fresh produce, you get frozen vegetables. They're just as nutrient dense, sometimes more nutrient dense than fresh. And I say that because, and just to give a little example of why that is, exposure to sun and air are the things that degrade veg and fruit. So this time of year, as we start going into fall and winter, if people are saying, okay, apparently blueberries are good for me, and tomatoes are really good for me, but it's fall, we're going into wintertime at some point soon, but the fresher the best. Nope, because we're going to be getting those from parts of the country where they have to ship them. They're going to be on a truck for a while, so that's air exposure. They're sitting out, they're getting light exposure. Then they get to the supermarket, and before you buy it, it might be sitting there for another 4 days. So that nutrition is going to start becoming depleted out of that tomato or out of those berries. Frozen, we flash freeze them at the peak of ripeness. All of that nutrition, all of those phytochemicals that are anti-inflammatory, all of that fiber, that's all in there. So frozen vegetables, we steam those in a hot minute in the microwave. We mix them in with some beans. We figure out the right seasoning or the way to make that really flavorful. Maybe you microwave a potato. Boom. That meal altogether for a family might be $7 to feed a family of 4 people. I mean, that's good. But it takes, again, I think part of that is just education and letting people know some of these hacks if they're on a budget. And number 2, I think it's accessibility to that education too. Like if somebody's working a couple jobs, how are we getting this information to people? So we just I think we have to be more clever and more creative and more imaginative in terms of how we approach this.
Yeah. Well,
and I'm signing up for it. I'm here for it.
Oh, okay. Oh, great. Great. Well, maybe we need to have a completely another separate episode that really dives into that.
Yeah.
Because what I want to do now is I want to talk about one of my favorite things, which is, we've mentioned it several times, the microbiome.
Yes.
And that has gotten so much press. It's a hot topic these days. And it's a fairly misunderstood concept. So let's talk about the microbiome and particularly the relationship of the microbiome is often referred to as our second brain, or our gut is referred to as a second brain. So can you maybe explain that in ways that the average listener is going to be able to digest that?
Yeah, why second brain? That's because between our brain and the nerves that connect our brain and our gut, there is a big nerve called the vagus nerve. This is responsible for our parasympathetic nervous system stimulation. Well, what the heck is that? That part of our nervous system essentially is the part that helps us chill out, slows down our heart rate. It is a vasodilator, so we have more, our blood vessels open up, so we have more fluidity of our blood. So that nerve connects, literally is this connection between our brain and our gut. And then off of that vagus nerve, that really big nerve, there's these little nerves that go and innervate or connect to our bowels. So what's interesting is if you think that those nerves from the brain are connecting into the tissue of the gut, it starts making sense why what we're eating is going to create feedback to the brain. Our brain is talking to our gut or our bowels, our stomach, and all of the entire GI tract. And the GI tract or the gastrointestinal tract is talking to our brain. It's a two-way road of communication. That's where the gut, that second, and the thinking is too, because there is this huge amount of innervation. And because if we look at the surface area, Jose, of the intestines, it's over 130 square feet. Okay, 130 square feet in our body is sending signals to our brain. That's bigger than one of the studio apartments I lived in Boston. Okay, so much surface area has the opportunity to talk to our brain. So, and then vice versa. So when we are feeling stressed, when we are getting anxious, think of all the little sayings we have that highlight the fact that our gut has this role. Like, I just had this gut feeling. I had butterflies. That's another one. We know that there is this way that our gut says, like, ooh, this situation's starting to feel a little uncomfortable, or gosh, I'm so anxious. Our bowels change when we have kind of anxiety or when we're excitement and we get those fluttery feelings. There is actual response in our gut depending on what's going on in our brain, and now we just have to start realizing that there is response in our brain depending on what's going on in our gut. So I think that direction is the one that's really interesting when we're looking at incidents of depression, anxiety, and how much of that is this messaging coming from this direction, from the gut up. And that's where I think a lot of research is starting to blow up.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of research that I was aware of, before 2010-ish, most of the research that I was familiar with related to gut health was basically about the digestive health,
right.
like the importance of probiotics for just the processing of food and blah, 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 blah. But then it started to blow up about, no, this connection goes way beyond how easily you're able to take nutrients into your body or expel waste.
Yeah.
There's a much, much deeper connection. And I have a very strong opinion about the holistic nature of life. And when you're looking at the system, you create the definition of holistic being that all the parts work together. And if you make a change in one part of the system, it creates a change in all parts of the system.
Yeah.
And that could be positively or negatively. So when we're thinking about the microbiome, it goes so far beyond just how well you can process your food. It goes into how the quality of your life, because it affects your mood, it affects your mental clarity, it affects that affects the decisions that you make. So everything begins it creates this kind of cascading effect in your life. But it's so interesting that people are looking for these external fixes to whatever's going on in their life, whether it be stress, anxiety, depression, things like that, as opposed to looking at what are the internal things? What are the things that I can control? And one of the things that we can control is what we put into our system. So when we think about this connection of the brain and the gut, and particularly the gut health, there are definitely going to be things that are going to increase the health of the microbiome, and there are things that are going to detract from it. So what are some of the main foods that we can think about adding into our diet that will help us to keep a healthy microbiome?
So before I answer that, let's rewind and define the microbiome for people. I think I failed to do that. So the microbiome is a completely separate ecosystem. So the microbiome is not us. Okay, so the microbiome is this huge trillions, not millions, trillions of a combination of bacteria, fungi, parasites, viruses that naturally live in our guts. And yours is different than mine, is different than my son's, is different than we all have our own unique ecosystem that's living primarily in our large intestine. We have microbes everywhere. We have them on our skin. We have them in our ears, in our stomachs, but the vast majority is going to be in our large intestine or our colon. So when we are healthy, there's a nice balance between the symbiotic bacteria and the bad bacteria in our gut. And when that's in balance, we would consider that a good, healthy, robust microbiome. And why do we want a healthy microbiome? We want a healthy microbiome because when we eat foods and they are passing through our GI tract, we want the right nutrition to go through into our bloodstream, and we want to keep the stuff that shouldn't be going through out. And the microbiome, these bugs, are working all day, all night, all day, to make sure that the lining of your GI tract, we have this mucosal layer. We have 2 layers of mucus, essentially, that lines our GI tract. And the microbiota, all of those bugs, are responsible for keeping that exactly how it should be. It should be a certain thickness. It should be a certain consistency. Again, if it gets too thin and watery, things are going to go through that shouldn't go through. Okay, so that's the one thing they do. The other thing they do is they help produce, they eat up things like, and then this will segue nicely into your question of what should we be eating. They eat up certain types of fiber, and their byproducts help create protection in this single cell layer that's below that mucus. It's only one cell lining. It's this thin single cell lining of epithelial cells that are the difference between the outside world and our inside world. So that single cell lining our GI tract, I mean, that's easy to get through. So that's why it's so important to have that mucus layer. And then there's really tight junctions between those cells. There has to be. Again, if we want to be really careful that toxins don't squeak through there and get into our bloodstream, those cells have to have really tight junctions. The microbiome is also responsible for making sure those don't have gaps between them. That's called leaky gut. So you want to make sure those are really tight together and nothing can get through. So the microbiome is eating up some of the fiber we're consuming, and byproducts of that, short-chain fatty acids, help in terms of keeping those junctions tight, produce anti-inflammatory properties for our system. So they are working hard, and they are in part responsible for the integrity of our immune system and the integrity of our GI tract and our ability to, again, absorb the good stuff and not absorb the bad stuff.
Yeah, I was so surprised when I was reading about the microbiome, and like you're saying, that layer of epithelial cells in our GI tract is only one layer thick.
That's it.
And that if the microbiome begins to get destroyed, it's a lot of times this is related to the overuse of things like our antibiotics. Mm-hmm. So it starts to kill off the good stuff in our guts. Right. And so as that layer gets thinner, then you can start to develop these digestive issues, particularly as that layer, if there's any lesions that occur, like you're talking about leaky gut, that it's like, oh, wow, that makes a whole lot of sense to me now, and why that is so important to us to keep that gut health going on.
Yeah.
So, as we're talking about the foods that might positively impact, and as you're saying, everybody has got a different kind of microbiome. So what are some of the properties, the type of foods and the properties that we should be considering to provide the best environment for our internal little buddies to survive in?
Yes, I love how you said that too. And that's how we have to think about them. They're our buddies, and they are working hard for us, again, all the time. So the foods that are going to be primarily the most helpful are going to be your plant-based foods, which include fibrous foods. And there's a whole bunch of different types of fibrous foods. But we have our starchy foods, we have our starchy vegetables, and we have our non-starchy vegetables, and they all are going to do something different within the interaction in our microbiome. When our microbiome eats those fibers, they create byproducts. These are called essentially postbiotics, and we're learning more about actually the potential of postbiotics and how they might be just as important, or maybe even more important than some of the pre and probiotics. But those postbiotics are kind of like the byproduct or the metabolite that we would say of consuming that fiber, that then travels and it's going to either help or hurt. Remember, so we can, the gut can, and the microbiome can be consuming things that are not healthful if it's not a plant food, if it's an ultra processed food, if it's a red meat or a processed meat. What that consumes and creates, that microbiome creates, will either hurt or help that gut lining and the mucosal layer. So when it's fiber, things like butyrate, that's a short-chain fatty acid. Short-chain fatty acids are super helpful in terms of reducing inflammation. We also talk about serotonin. Let's talk about that for a second. And the ability for our gut, most of that's actually produced in our gut. That feel-good hormone, we think about serotonin in the brain. Actually, most of it's produced in the gut. So the microbiome and their metabolites can influence production of serotonin as well. So there's lots of different reasons consumption of fiber can be helpful. So plant-based foods is going to be important. The other reason plant-based foods are important, and when I talk about, again, plant-based, I'm talking about vegetables, fruits, starchy foods like potatoes, whole grains are also in that category of plant-based foods. What's going to happen when our microbes are consuming these colorful veg and fruit? They are consuming the plant's immune system. Okay, that's a phytochemical. So when you ever hear that long, funky word phytochemical or phytonutrient, we're essentially talking about the plant's immune system. You might have heard of anthocyanins or lutein, lycopene. That's just another name for, plant phytochemicals. So the microbes also can consume those, and those have quite an anti-inflammatory and in my field, anti-cancer properties. So plants are also kind of bathing our enterocytes and our GI tract with those anti-inflammatory properties called phytochemicals.
All right, awesome. So if we know what are the good things that we should be adding, what are some of the things that we should try to avoid in order to maintain that good, healthy gut?
Yeah. So you mentioned it a few times, the ultra-processed foods. And I actually am going to take this from a little bit of a different angle, because I think people think when I go in, whether I'm, working with a client or I'm working with a cancer patient, I shouldn't say everybody, but sometimes people will cringe when they're like, okay, here comes the dietitian. She's going to tell me all the things I need to stop eating. The first thing I'm actually working with patient or the client is what they're missing. I want to know what is not getting into your GI tract that can actually be very restorative, can be healing, can be anti-inflammatory, and can be anti-cancer. So before I even start working on things that would be helpful to reduce in their diet, I'm looking at what's missing and working with them to figure out how we can start plugging that in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. How can we get more plant-based, high fiber, high phytonutrient containing foods in their diet? So that's step number one. That's just important to highlight. And we talk about foods that when you do consume a lot of plant-based foods, you're not going to have enough room on the plate or in your stomach, quite frankly, to have a lot of the other stuff, because these foods are very filling. They're very satisfying. So that's something to know too. And healthful fats like olive oil, olives, nuts, and seeds. Oh my gosh, if you pair those with plant-based foods, you will be full and satisfied for a long time. So I think when people think plant-based, they're like salads, like wah, wah, I don't want to go around eating salads all day. It does not have to be salads. We think about roasted vegetables that have olive oil on them with, grains, and maybe you have like your hard-boiled egg on top or some degree of plant-based or animal-based foods. I'm not opposed to those, but I do think we have to shift how much of them are going into our diet, because when we look at particularly processed meats, red meats, we know that has a negative impact. Colon cancer, when I work with my colon cancer patients, it's one of the first things I say, okay, if you have that in there, we got to find a way to replace it with something else, because there's enough data to show that is a for certain risk factor for colorectal cancer. One of the reasons, why, and so this is where it's starting to get really interesting. Before we thought with cardiovascular disease and red meat, it had to do with cholesterol. And not to say that it doesn't, but an interesting new thing is this impacting the microbiome? And maybe from a cancer perspective, is this affecting the microbiome? But what's interesting is when we consume red meats and other types of animal protein, the microbiota create this metabolite or this postbiotic or this compound afterwards after consuming that then can travel to the liver. It's converted into something called trimethylamine N oxide, TMAO. And TMAO then is released into our circulation where it can have impact on our cardiovascular system, atherosclerosis. So that narrowing of and damage to the lining of our vessels, our blood vessels. So this chemical or this compound from consuming red meat or processed meats or other types of animal protein, that happens because of our microbiome. So if we are to start replacing, in my opinion, if we start replacing some animal-based sources of protein with plant-based sources, A, we're going to be feeding the good bugs, and B, we're going to be reducing the amount of TMAO that's circulating in our system. We're also going to be reducing the contact of red meat with our GI tract. And that's really how I think when we're looking at GI cancers, colorectal cancer, I think we aren't 100% sure exactly what the mechanism is, but I'm starting to think that we're going to find out it has something to do with that contact of the compounds and the metabolites of red meat on that lining, on the GI tract, and inflammation and creation of those, the polyps that eventually become cancerous over time, and continued exposure over and over of those types of food and low quality nutrition just, can create those polyps into something more serious, like a cancer.
Yeah. Well, and you have been talking about cancer quite a bit in this portion of our conversation, and I'm a cancer survivor. And as such, I certainly, anytime someone's talking about cancer prevention or things that will help people to better deal with having that kind of health issue, I get very excited. I get very interested because I have a vested interest in it. So with your work with cancer patients, how have you seen the impact of these kind of dietary adjustments? We'll say adjustments as opposed to changes. How does that help not only the physical process, but how does it also help with like the mental and emotional balance that's required for healing?
Oh, such a good question. So when we have, one of the other things that I look at when I'm working with somebody is the amount of sugar-sweetened beverages they're consuming. A lot of my cancer patients come in and they're doing, a lot of sweetened teas or sodas. And when I talk to them about, again, the effect on their GI tract and on their gut health, when I talk to them about spikes in blood sugar, which are not good for cancer patients or anybody, to the extent we can reduce how often we're spiking our blood sugars, holy cow, would that make a difference? Would that make a difference? So that's for sure one of the stools I hop up on. If I can say one thing about making a dietary change outside of like the fiber and the importance of plants, please reduce how much sugar-sweetened beverages that you're consuming. That's huge. And the reason I'm saying that now with your question is when I have patients that really take me seriously and lop out the sugar-sweetened beverages, their energy goes up. Because before, their blood sugar was spiking and it was dropping, and it was spiking and it was dropping throughout the whole day. And so what happens when your blood sugar drops is, of course, our body is evolved to say, like, the sirens go off and it goes, like, we got to get some more sugar in here. Your blood sugar's too low. That's not safe. And so what do we crave? Okay, we crave more sugar. We crave another soda or another sugar-sweetened coffee beverage. And our blood sugar comes back up, but it keeps going up and it goes too high. So then it drops down low again. And that's a whole cycle. That's the blood sugar roller coaster. So when people start making changes like reducing the amount of sugar-sweetened beverages, their energy changes. It's a really quick way to also lose weight because those extra calories, they're so easy to store. And we don't need all of those extra calories from sugar-sweetened beverages. So we store them so people lose a lot of weight quickly. So just those two things alone put people in this mindset of like, well, what the heck else can I do here, right? A lot of people have pooping problems, quite frankly. A lot of people walking out there have pooping problems, and my patients are no exception. So when they start including more plant-based foods, initially, sometimes if you haven't had them for a while, you're going to have some gas. You're going to have some bloating because that microbiome is like, whoa, hello. Haven't seen this around in a while. And it's going to create a lot of byproducts. Byproducts are gas. And they can have some bloating. So I usually take baby steps when I'm introducing fiber to someone's diet that has very little. But just having normal poops is a great example. And like to have a really good bowel movement, that's a very satisfying thing for people. So like I want everybody out there, let's have some good poops, you know?
Yeah.
So those are some of the things. But like, gosh, having stable energy, when you consume a lot of fiber, you just don't have the spikes in energy and drops in energy throughout the day. You have this really nice, stable energy. And you know what else follows stable energy? Stable mood, you know? So when people make those changes, I think it's just that if you've never had these feelings before, it's a little bit of a leap of faith. I will say that. So for people that haven't had the experience of having stable energy, but always thinking they have to fight fatigue, it's a leap of faith for them to give these things a try, and I appreciate that. Again, remember, I didn't always eat a plant-based diet. I didn't, and so my understanding was that was normal to kind of have spikes in energy, but then just feeling really tired and irritable and craving those processed foods. I thought that was normal to crave those foods. And it's only normal because that's what we're feeding ourselves. It's what we feed our taste buds over and over, and it's what we're feeding our microbiome. So those bacteria that are flourishing on those processed foods, guess what? They're sending signals back up to your brain. And what are they saying? That was good. Do that again. And when we consume a lot of plant-based foods, guess what signals are going up to your brain? It's easier to make that lifestyle switch when we start small and we build up. Eventually, you can be that person that's like, oh man, I want some like roasted vegetables. Oh man, I want a peach. Like a peach sounds so good right now. But while you're still doing the breakfast of toaster strudels, # one of my other favorite breakfasts when I was a kid.
Yeah, I do.
Oh, so good. But when you are exposing yourself over and over to those foods, that's what you're going to be craving. So it's breaking that cycle and start introducing this good stuff into our GI tract and onto the taste buds, the very first thing. These taste buds, they turn over too, by the way. So the taste buds that you have now don't have to be the taste buds if you expose it to new foods. They change. Just because we're adults, we can change our taste. That's huge. So from a palatability and a desire perspective, we're not stuck with the taste buds we had since we were 5. Like, they turn over like all the other cells in our body, which is good news.
Well, that is good news.
Yeah.
I've always been accused of having poor taste, so I guess maybe get some more.
That's not nice.
Yeah.
Who said that?
I
want to know who said that. That wasn't nice.
Well, anyway, so yeah, it's interesting because when we think about consumption, the things that we bring into our bodies, into ourselves, food is certainly one, and that does dictate our health and our well-being more. Because I think when people think about health and healthy eating, they're just thinking about maybe their blood sugar or their cholesterol levels or the pant size.
Yeah,
that's what they think about, but not thinking about how it has this impact on us holistically. So we have to be careful about the food we take into our system. We need to be careful about the information that we consume. So making sure that we're getting quality information to feed our brains. We need to get quality air to not saying that you need to leave the city if you live in the city, but getting fresh air, having quality air, clean water, all these different things that impact us. And like you were saying, I think making the small changes, that's important, because when people start to have health issues, and I know that's what kind of I had to go through, and I guess I'm fortunate in that I've always had more of a balanced approach to life, but a lot of times people are trying to make wholesale change in their life, and just like, I'm completely scrapping everything and I'm creating this whole new life. And sometimes that's what they need to do, and that's what they have to do, right? And that's cool. But I think for most people, the reason that they fail in making those positive changes is because they're trying to take too big of a step to start out with. So making these incremental steps, I think, is critical to the longevity, because it becomes something that's sustainable, and it's something that we can see the progress. We can gain the momentum, as opposed to when we're looking at this huge gap, this disparity between where we are and where we want to be.
Yes, yeah. And I will piggyback off of that and say, we also need to be making changes that we enjoy. I think that's huge with this movement that, by the way, it's not going anywhere. This understanding of how the microbiome works, and the fact that it really needs plant-based foods to thrive and flourish, that's not going anywhere. I believe that in my gut, Jose. I believe it in my gut. But if we're going to make those changes, and if they're going to be sustainable, yes to incremental, and absolutely 100% non-negotiable, you have to like what you're doing. And so for people, when they come back to me and they say, okay, I started doing those things, my next question to them is, okay, on a scale from 0 to 10, how much are you enjoying how you're eating right now? That is so important to me, because if somebody comes back and they've started implementing some of these changes and they give me a 6, I go, okay, how would we have made it a 9? What would have made it a 9 or a 10? And they let me know what would have made it a 9 or 10. And so then I work with that. But if people are making healthful changes, for example, they're like pounding these kale smoothies that have this added blah, 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 and they have to pinch their nose to do it every morning, nope, no thank you, because that is called dieting. My saying is, and I should trademark this, quite frankly, because it's so good, but my saying is, if you are going into a meal and you are not looking forward to eating it, you are dieting. If you leave a meal and you are not satisfied, you are dieting. If you can't say yes to both of those, I'm looking forward to this and that was satisfying, you are dieting. And I have no time for diets. I have 0 time. To your point, this has to be something that is sustainable, but by God, it has to be enjoyable too. And that's what I think turns a lot of people off. I think that's what turns a lot of people that will say, look, I'm a meat and potatoes person. I'm a meat and potatoes person. Again, remember, I was a meat and potatoes person. So I get that. And if I would have tried to make a transition from meat and potatoes to a salad with cucumber and tomatoes in it, like the thought of that right now to me, I don't want to eat that. That does not sound good to me. If I'm going to have a salad, let me tell you, Jose, what's going to be on my salad, okay? I want lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, okay, great. But let's keep going. I probably want a little bit of feta cheese. I would like some olives. I want some kind of nut. Maybe I want a little bit of candied pecans on there. And I probably want a grain on there too. So I want some, maybe I'm going to have, some brown rice, or I'm going to have some mixed grain thing on top of it, warm. And, maybe this is the day, maybe I have like an egg over easy on top for a little like extra bump of protein or something like that. Or some days I will leave that off. But that salad, and maybe sometimes I like a sweet potato chopped up. Maybe that's my starch that day on my salad. But that I will eat. And that I will say, oh man, I can't wait for lunchtime. I can't wait for lunchtime. And we have places like that in Lancaster, by the way, that make rockin' plant-based meals. But the latter, or the former salad that I mentioned, that former salad, I want nothing to do with that. Number 1, I don't look forward to it. Number 2, when I leave that meal, I will be so hungry. And then guess what? When I walk by and somebody has, brought donuts in, you better believe I'm going to want a donut, and you better believe I'm going to eat a donut because I'm hungry, okay? And then people say, well, I can't eat plant-based. And that's where we have to rethink it. And that's where we have to say, okay, you have to be able to say yes to both of those. Or when you see the foods that are ultra processed, or you see the foods that are calorie rich, your body's going to be like, yo, bro, go eat it. You didn't have enough to eat. Number one. Number two, I didn't like it. So go have the donut. So there's psychology to it. I would say there's psychology to the vast majority of nutrition recommendations, because we have to appeal to our desire for food and our satisfaction. We have to appeal to the fact that we all have different cultural backgrounds and we all have different relationships with food. So I'm not going to go down, again, those could be like 6 different podcasts. And I hope they will be, Jose, because it's so juicy. But so I won't go down that way, but that's just all to say yes to incremental, but by God, please, yes to really enjoyable. And it might be an experiment, by the way, until you figure out what enjoyable means to you. So we can't give up on ourselves. That's the other thing. You can't give up. If you try, you're like, okay, people said like roasted asparagus is good. Like, I don't know, but try it. You might not like it the first time. Maybe you're somebody that likes it shaved into something else with a vinaigrette. Maybe you just need to keep exposing your taste buds until your taste buds are like, oh, no, I get it now. Okay, I get it now. But there is that exposure period. 12 to 14 exposures, did you know that? Of a new food until taste buds are like, got it. So for kids, when we give kids a new food, we're exposing them to avocado or we're exposing them to broccoli. Like these foods are different. And particularly broccoli, those cruciferous foods, they're a little bit bitter. They're a little bit tart. They're not awesome raw. But you give them to a kiddo and they make this horrible face, right? They're like, they're spitting it out. Parents can easily go like, oh, whoop, they don't like that. They don't like that. Let's stick with, the pureed sweet stuff because they love that. Well, they've only had 1 exposure, or they've only had 4, or they've only had 7. 12 to 14 is the average amount of food exposures or exposures of particular foods before the taste buds get it. So we don't give up on kids, and we don't give up on ourselves as adults if we're like, think we're stuck or we're like set in our ways. You can tell yourself that, but it's not true.
Yeah. Well, I never realized that I learned something big there. I mean, so folks, make sure that you take out your highlighter and highlight that, and remember that 12 to 14. That's great because I think back to my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I love my mom. She was not the best cook.
Okay.
Like most moms,
Yeah.
I think so sometimes. Now she can make some banging enchiladas and stuff like that. So I'm always good with that.
Yeah.
But I remember growing up, and whenever we would have vegetables, like, we'd have broccoli, and it would just be overcooked, and it's just, it looked bad, it tasted bad, and there's nothing to it. Now, as an adult, I love broccoli.
Yeah.
I love Brussels sprouts. I love asparagus. But it's because I had never really experienced them being well prepared.
Right.
And as soon as I did, it's like, oh, I do like that. Let me try it again.
Good.
And
I love
then
that.
the more I eat it, the more I like it. And there are other things that I enjoyed as a kid I don't particularly enjoy now. So I like the fact that our taste buds do change and grow, and we do have the ability to do that. And it's the mindset, and that's my jam.
Okay, yeah,
or my preserves, or my jelly, or whatever you want to call it. That when we talk about diets have this immediate negative connotation. It's I'm going to restrict what I'm doing. I'm going to avoid this. I'm going to deprive myself of these things.
Yeah.
So it's all this negativity that's going on in your brain. So you're already setting up a conflict as opposed to I'm going to open myself to this new experience.
Yeah.
I'm going to do something different. I'm going to experience this. And by just creating that little shift, then that opens your mind, and then that's going to change the way you approach things, and it's going to give you a completely different experience. So I really love that, and I love how it all comes together to create this unique individual that we each are.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I do certainly want to have you back on for some future episodes where we can dive into some more of this stuff. So if people want to get a hold of you, what's a great way for them to contact you?
Yeah. So for right now, I mean, email is great. Somebody can shoot me an email if they're interested and they want to learn more. I have a private business, actually, that's going to be launched very soon. I'm so excited. I'm working here out of the candy factory in Lancaster. So that website will be coming soon. And do you want to hear what the website name is,
Absolutely,
Jose?
yeah.
I mean, I'm really fired up about this. It's called nomorebs.club. And it's called nomorebs.club because we are looking at all the different ways that there's a whole bunch of BS out there that's confusing people about, guess what, nutrition and a whole bunch of other things. So for people that are like, I want to figure out my gut health, but please, like, talk to me straight about this. Or it's just this opportunity for people to join a club where we're going to talk real talk about these things. And so that's coming soon. So excited. And so, more conversations and more information to come on that, I'm sure. But my email address, if people want to get a hold of me, is Emily Biever, like Justin Bieber, but with the V, people, at iCloud.com. Love to hear from you if you're interested in connecting. I do see clients. So if somebody's wanting to work on their nutrition or, just shoot the shit about what they're eating, please feel free to connect with me.
All right. Well, the links will be in the show notes. And I'm really excited about what you are bringing to the table. And I want to have you back on as soon when you get that website launched. Let's get you back on and let's talk some more. And maybe people have some questions for you.
Oh, that would be lovely. I'd love to hear people's questions.
That would be fantastic to have a discussion about that. But Em, this has been an absolute joy to sit here and talk with you.
Oh my God, likewise. Likewise. We could go for another 3 hours. I feel it in my bones. I'm restraining myself. This has been tough. Thank you, Jose. Truly, thank you. I appreciate this conversation very much.
I think it's one that's really needed, and I like the no BS thing because that's kind of my one of my catchphrases is I'd like to demystify the mystical and simplify the scientific.
Yes.
Because we just want to make it accessible to people.
That's right.
We want to remove all those barriers.
And everyone should have access to this. Everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I thank you so much for your hard work. And folks, make sure you keep tabs on Em and what she's got going on because she is a wonderful resource as as a very fashionable person. Unfortunately, this is not a video podcast because you would see her wonderful earrings and her wonderful glasses.
Yeah, I'm put together. I put myself together for you this morning.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You bet.
All right, folks. Thanks a lot for joining us for this episode. And as always, if you have any questions or suggestions for a future topic, please drop me a line because I'm here for you. So until next time, folks, remember, it is what it is, but it becomes what you make it. So make it great. Thanks for tuning in. Before we wrap up, I just want to remind you that the information shared in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional advice or treatment. While the content of this podcast is based on research and personal experience, everyone's situation is unique, and the advice given may not be applicable to all. Always consult a qualified professional before making significant changes in your life. The Personal Mastery and Growth podcast is recorded at the So Good Media Studios located in the Candy Factory, a co-working space in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.